We understand that there are many objections that you or others you know may have towards Jesus, but just wait until you hear this.
Compares to this moment that she's having right here. Watch this.
I'm not the same woman anymore. You guys, this Jesus stuff is real. I used to make fun of people who would, make videos about Jesus, and I've been so quiet because I've been trying to focus on him, but I can't hold it in anymore, you guys. He's real. And the power that comes from giving him your whole heart and just following him is unreal, you guys.
So, to those of you who have objections to Jesus, I know that this might be something that you add to the shelf and be like, oh, this is just another one of those emotional people and emotionalism and all that kind of stuff. But this touches in so many different directions. And I know for me it does, because I can relate from my story, my testimony. Obviously, I grew up in church. I mean, that's kind of where I came from. But really encountering Jesus when I started making decisions to honor a relationship with Jesus in the midst of other people, man, I just started seeing things change in my life for the better. My speech grew, my understanding grew, capacity grew, challenges definitely came, but being able to just experience his love leaves so much of an imprint that it just makes me wonder, man, who wouldn't want to experience this for their life? And this is, it's just up there for me. I've heard quite a few testimonies. I don't even know that girl's story, but I know it's something powerful to have encountered him and be the complete opposite of maybe where some of you might currently be, where you're like, man, y'all getting on here and talking about this Jesus thing, man. I don't know about all that. And she's on the other side of things. And I think it's a beautiful thing. And it continues to testify to who Jesus is and the impact that he has, still today, that he's still alive today, still changing lives, changing hearts, saving souls, and is just as amazing and is the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. And so I think those are my opening thoughts on this, but it's impactful to say the least. What are some of your thoughts on it?
Well, man, I'd love for you just to continue on with what your thoughts are. What I mean, share with people where you talked a little bit about what's relatable, but deep dive into it. Go ahead.
Man. Yeah. So, man, I think a little bit of my own testimony, I think, is maybe where I would start. Again, I grew up in church, Baptist church. I mean, parents always had us as children in there. And I actually really grew to love the system and organization of church. That's what I was introduced to. The Hammond B3
Most
pastor. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like,
especially in black church.
Right. So, you hear the Hammond B3, the pastor the head pastor coming out in robes and preaching and teaching. And, that's how I was introduced to Jesus. I was baptized when I was 7 years old. January 7th, 2007 actually was that the spiritual rebirth date. And it wasn't by force, like I had to. It was something I wanted to do. And I really loved it. We made a move out of that home state that we grew up in back in 2011 to Texas. And, we've been residents of Texas for the last 13 years or so. And from that point on, I think there was a struggle to find a church home relatable to what we left. And so, we were kind of in and out of church. We kind of slowly turned into those people that went to church on those holidays, Mother's Day, Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter, those kinds of things. And I kind of slowly fell out of rhythm with a lot of that through my middle school years, high school years. Still had moments where it was imprinted. I'll be watching sermons here and there, but nothing really like as real and authentic as I've grown to be in such a space. And so coming junior year, senior year of high school is where I really started to kind of start taking those steps again to just really rededicating or coming back to just understanding, okay, Jesus, I know he died for me. I've heard that over and over again in my life. But having a legitimate relationship with him, what does that look like? And it definitely took another step as I went from junior year and senior year of high school into college. where I started, doing more sermons, listening to those things, and it became something that was a regular practice. And then, at that same time, I was pursuing basketball. I was pursuing pro sports. I was trying to do all those things. It definitely really had my heart. I would say now, looking back, it was more of like an idol in my life. It was a place I spent more time in the gym, more time working out, more time practicing than I ever did in anything else. Church included, studies included, all that kind of stuff. So when the pandemic hit, a lot of that stuff changed. And, it was really funny because there was a impressing an impression on my heart, rather, that what I was kind of wrestling with throughout all of those years that I summarized, middle school, elementary school, and high school, it kind of all came back full circle in the moment of the pandemic, to where I had to make a choice. Okay, so there's this continual reminder of a calling on my life, to teach, to communicate the gospel, to do those kinds of things, and in whichever way God was going to present that from, I really didn't know at that time. But there was that, or I can go back and choose to continue to pursue something that God was clearly not allowing to happen in the degree that I wanted it to. I mean, I had tryouts that went successful, couldn't get a scholarship because the money was just crazy. Leaving high school, averaging decent numbers to be 1 year varsity at that time. I wanted to go overseas. I had just got landed to an academy where I was projected to really go, actually allow that to come true, give 2-3 years. And then the pandemic hits, and so there was so much ups and downs, doors, walls that I was just smacking over and over again over there. And so, man, I just made the decision. I prayed a prayer. I'll never forget it. Lord, if you want me to pursue basketball, if you really want me to do this, put that same fire in me that I had when I was getting cut back in middle school, when I was getting cut, and I wanted to make an emphasis to make the team, because basketball was the sport I always wanted to play, and that is where a lot of the grind, a lot of the hard work, a lot of the sacrifice took place. I said, or take it all away from me, like don't put, if you don't want me to do that, don't put that same spark in my heart, and put it towards something that you really want me to do, where you really want me to be. And I kid y'all not, man, from that day on, even to this day, of course, I love basketball. I play it when I get a chance, but there is no ounce of spark and desire to the degree that I had then to pursue the sport. And it's all been put into teaching, into coaching, preaching, these seasons and things that God has put in front of me to multiply and in so many ways. And so when I first made that transition, it was really difficult. I had to refine my identity. My identity was really, really stocked up in basketball. So many people telling me, based on my height, based on my play, oh, you're going to go somewhere, you're going to be somewhere. So there was a lot of shifting of identity there, and a lot of just relearning, man, really who God is, because I only knew him from the lens of church. I never really knew him based on reading the text, reading the scriptures. And I had friends that I was connected to at that time that really brought a lot of that out of me, whether it was sharing scriptures of the day, notes that we took from sermons and Sundays, or whatever the case was, it really exposed that, like, man, I don't really know this as well as I should, or that I think I do. I would go through the Bible, look at highlighted verses to try to find something to send for the day, and not really even know what it was. But I remember just sitting down again in the pandemic and making a decision to spend more time with Jesus, to start sitting down and reading the scriptures. That's actually when you and I connected. It's so interesting how all that happened. I believe, what was that, September of 2020? 2020, man. And I remember our first call. And you mentioning, man, have you ever thought about pastoring or preaching and things like that? And I was like, man, shoot, no. And man, it was because of your you playing a huge role in my life at that time, and still do to this day, of mentorship, leadership, brotherhood, and connection, all those things, man, that has definitely impacted me and taken my faith to higher levels in so many ways. And I think that those were moments that really began to shape how I viewed God in such a relationship manner, and leaving from like a religious structure that I was so used to. And I can't tell you how many times when I think back to the sicknesses that I've dealt with, the struggles that I have endured with my family, losing a brother at the age of 6, he was 10, losing a grandmother 6 months later that same year, losing that, just death in the family, struggles, and all those kinds of hardships that more than I will ever know. Parents never really told us all those things, and I'm grateful for that. But enduring those things that were visible, that were hard to hide, and was impossible to cover up, and we dealt with that as a family. I mean, those things played a role to my individual sicknesses that I incurred when I was a kid. I had stomach issues from about age 6 to about age 12 for 6 years. I mean, going in and out of ERs, doctor visits, doctors couldn't tell me what was up, what was going on, and just being in struggle after struggle, pain after pain. And not only experiencing God as a healer, not only experiencing God as a redeemer, but then elevating my relationship with him to experiencing him as Lord, experiencing him as friend, as my friend, as confidant, as my teacher, everything. I mean, just everything to me at this point in life. And with that, I mean, there has still been challenges. Those challenges have not gone away.
Of course.
But I just, when I every time, man, when I think of, I know there's a cliche when you think about what God's done for you and all those kinds of things, all it causes is a thought. But I legitimately live in that space where at heart, I choose to be a worshiper. At heart, I choose to honor him with everything in my being to the best of my ability every day. Starting my day with him, really, really looking to learn and just grow more and more in who God has called me to be, but more importantly, grow in him. And it draws tears. It's not from a place of thinking that if you don't cry, you're not real. It's not real. It can't be real. I'm not in any way, shape, or form suggesting that, but those emotions that she expresses in that comes from a genuine encounter with Christ, comes from a genuine encounter where she experienced a love that she had been looking for. She experienced a grace and mercy that she had been needing, redemption and washing, renewing that she had been needing up to that point in her life, exposing those things that she was lacking and finding that fulfillment in the same person that she's come to, and recognizing that what she came to is available to me, is available to you, is available to us all. And I think from my own story, being someone who grew up in it to then experiencing a legitimate encounter, and to have moments in my walk, even at this age, being currently 24 at the time of recording this, of course, like just walking this thing out and looking back over my life. I was thinking about it this morning, reading the book of James. James reiterates faith and works, and he points back to Abraham and Sarah. And of course, when we read the book of Genesis, we see Abraham seems to have following God all his life. Right. And he has a moment, even in the midst of him following God all of his life, where, there was something that validated his faith. Faith was inspired by his works, were inspired by his faith. And it was something that validated him in the sense of him giving up Isaac, trusting that God, okay, I know all you said that you were going to do here with this boy. So I'm assuming if you're going to allow me to do this, that you're going to raise him from the dead and do something with him. And so, but then seeing Rahab, who he also compares to, who has a very opposite history to who Abraham, who she's being compared to in that same text, being Abraham. She's a prostitute. She's a woman. She's not married. She doesn't have children. All these different things that play against her in this culture. And yet she has a moment based on all the things that she's hearing. This is someone that I want to choose to worship and follow and convert and live for. And no matter her past, God redeems all of that. And she makes a decision to honor him. And she's remembered and recorded, not just in the New Testament, but also in the genealogy of the very Christ that we acknowledge is God, is the Son of God. And I think that says so much to her. And of course, to the redemption, the redemptive power, the authority that Christ has over our lives as individuals. And I just look at all of that. And, no matter how far you've been in the faith, or no matter how fresh you are in the faith, whether you have to look back over your life and see a testimony from the beginning when you first converted, to perhaps recent events that you can look at and say, man, that's where my faith was validated. That was a moment where my faith was tested and I chose to honor God there. Whether it was way then or whether it's today, you have an opportunity to choose to honor God in those spaces. And I just think back for me, listening and reading that obviously scripture and listening to that message, just thinking back over my life, I have moments where I can honestly say my faith was validated. This was a moment where crushing disappointment, things happened in my life. And there was where I really experienced God, experienced his love, and was legitimately able to see he was doing transformative work in my heart to change me, not just to be a good person, but to bring me to life, to experience life in him. And I will tell anybody and everybody to the day I take my last breath of just how amazing God is, and that without him, I can't be who I am and can't get to where he's calling me to be. And he is always where life is, and life is more abundantly. And so,
Yeah.
Just a small taste for me in my walking experience, but I can just completely relate to this video, because I can't tell you how many, how many tears I've cried, whether out of frustration and hurt that God was near,
Yeah.
out of disappointment that God was near, and out of appreciation of just who God is, and just really being able to try and wrap my mind around an eternal love that he offers and who he is, and being that validation for me, being that father for me, being that confidant, that teacher for me, my friend, Lord, Savior, healer, redeemer, you name it, that's him. And it's because of him, man, that I have been where I am, and that it will be because of me remaining and abiding in him that I will get to where I'm called to be, for the time that I have on this earth until we cross to eternity. I can't tell you how many times I've thought about last word. I can't tell you how many times I've thought about just what it's going to be like, man. Genuinely, what it's going to be like to get there and to fall in his arms.
Yeah. So listen, man, first of all, thanks for sharing all of that.
Yeah.
Because it's good for people to hear. Let me dive into this response to her, what she said, right? First of all, we know that the church currently is under a lot of scrutiny right now, the church, because of actions and activities of leaders within the church, lack of accountability, things along those lines. And what I love about this lady is she says something in here, which is where I would love for people to put their focus. She said, this thing with God is real. She didn't say this thing with church. She didn't say this thing with Sunday morning. She didn't say this thing with Wednesday night. She didn't say this thing with Bible study. She said this thing with God is real. In other words, she's saying the relationship with God, the relationship that I'm getting to have with God. Because here's what I want people to understand. I want to say this up front for those who might be skeptics watching us in this particular video. Listen, the church is full of people that are still struggling and still on their way. There's no perfect people. And the beautiful thing about what she says is like, hey, where she was and where she is now, she's like, this thing is real. It is real. How does she know it's real? Because she's had her own encounter. She even had to wrestle, I'm assuming, with her own flesh, like with herself, and see herself, right? And even other people. But she had a radical encounter with God. And that is the beautiful thing about it for me, man, is that her encounter with God is the thing that makes it real. You know, I had a story not quite as similar, but it had some similarities to it, where I grew up in church my whole life. And then I walked away. But there was this time right around when I was 21 years old, man, where I just flat out told God, I was like, if you are who you said that you are, I just need you to reveal yourself to me. And man, I'm gonna tell you, that's what this lady reminded me of. When I was listening to her, this is what it reminded me of, because no, God didn't come and burn a bush in front of me, or, you know, a building didn't come, but I did have this experience where I encountered this overwhelming, incredible, like, love that took over everything that was in me, and it was unexplainable.
Yeah.
And in this is what I hear her saying. There's not words for it when you have this true encounter, right? There's not these things, these words that you can attach to it to make it make sense to you, because it can't be explained. It has to be experienced, right? It's one of those things. And so I would say to people that the invitation that I would give to you as a believer, first and foremost, I'm a Christian. Second of all, I've been a pastor. Third of all, I love who God is. I love what I see God do in people's lives, and I'm a witness to the things that God has done in my own life. I'm a flat out witness to the things that God has done in my own life, and I for whatever it's worth, I really want you to understand that it's the encounter that you have with Jesus that is the most important thing. Because when you go to church, I just want to tell you, when you start going to a local worshiping community, if you're currently in a local worshiping community, I want to help those who will be listening to this today. There are people that are in process in worship communities. That means they're still struggling with addictions of all kinds, lying, trying to get their lives together in terms of, how they deal with the current relationships they have, their business. There are people who've lost homes. There are people who are dealing with sickness, disease. There are people who are dealing with trauma. There are people who are dealing with all kinds of other struggles and temptations that are going on in their lives. And they're still trying to work out their salvation with fear and trembling. So the church isn't a perfect place, but the God that is in pursuit of us. I love what Paul said. Paul said, I'm forgetting those things which are behind, and I'm pressing toward the mark of the prize of the high call of God, which is found in Christ Jesus. And so I want to keep this as simple for those of you who might be novice in the gospel or just pursuing it. And this is the first video you've ever seen that when Paul says that he's forgetting what's behind him and he's pressing, Paul is humanly sharing that the way to God is oppressing, like there's things coming against him. And this is the thing that happens. And so it's clear to me that this lady too had stuff that she had to wrestle with. She had stuff she had to wrestle with. I had stuff I had to wrestle with. Sean, you had stuff that you had to wrestle with. And so the reality of it is, Sean, is that when we move through this process, man, of getting to know who Christ is, it's less, Sean, about the church, is less about sermons, is less about worship, is less about any of those things, and it's more about the person of Jesus. And I wish that Christians would present more of the person of Christ than we do all the auxiliary things that come with knowing Christ, hence being in a community, going to a church, showing up at the church. These are all things that you should do ultimately. But I don't want you to confuse who Jesus is with the struggle that you see his people in his body, because the body, I just want you to understand this. Paul makes it very clear to us. There's a contrast, right? That he says in Romans 7, he says, when I want to do good, evil is always present with me. There's always going to be this tension in life. So you won't see perfection out of people. You do want to see progress. You do want to see attempts at people pursuing integrity and character, and pursuing the word of God and its instruction to us. So we do want to see that. So I'm not making an excuse, but I don't want you to miss what this lady is saying. This lady is saying, I laid everything down because of the encounter that I had. And it's just real. She's like, it is just real. This is sincere. It is honest. It's not fake. It's not false. And that is the encounter that I'm praying that people will have, Sean, because that is what this lady had. The encounters with Jesus. That's why when he said to the people who were surrounding him in the Garden of Gethsemane, he said, if the Son of Man is lifted up, then I'll draw all men unto myself. Here's the deal. When the people of God lift Jesus, he's the draw, not the church, not the sermon, not the pastor, not the worship, not the building, none of that. When Jesus is lifted, he's the draw. And somewhere in this lady's life, she was able to clearly see it. And she had this encounter. And that was what we encountered from her message.
Yeah. And I think this reminds me too, man, because I've spent time after time when I've encountered other people who don't share the same beliefs and same backgrounds. It's easy to go down the rabbit hole of explaining to you morality and where we get laws, and go a route of more of what we would label as apologetics, right? Just defending the faith and all these different examples, scenarios, stories, all these things that we can easily dive into that could possibly explain to somebody the existence of God and the legitimacy of the Bible and all these different things. But what I've learned, man, is oftentimes for people that are skeptics in this space, that isn't their issue. A lot of times that isn't always the issue, that isn't always the struggle. And sometimes it's more of being around people who claim to believe this, but their lives never really reflected it. And because their lives didn't reflect it, they never really felt they got to experience the same love that we hold near and dear to our own lives. And so I think sometimes what is even more beneficial than perhaps going down a route of legalities, or going down the route of all these different explanations that go so deep and so profound and so bombastic sometimes if you're not careful. I think what's so been more beneficial is just telling the story, like just telling my story, what God has done for me, and the encounter, the relationship, just literally giving an opportunity to just see who God is and how he is moving in my life, and him being able to do things that other people couldn't do for me, that a position, status, money can't do for me, a level of peace that I have never been able to encounter more outside of him, a level of reassurance, love, and validation that no person, no woman, no man, no person can ever give me. Father, mother, brother, sister, doesn't matter. And really just giving myself an opportunity to experience him in such levels. And, sometimes I think that's more of what people are really looking for. And I think that giving yourself the opportunity to just say, Lord, if you are real, show me. Like, Lord,
Yeah.
if you are who you say you are, reveal yourself to me.
Yeah.
And I think you saying something even as that, no profound prayer, nothing extra, nothing crazy, and just watch what happens. Watch how God just reveals himself to you, and really, really lean into that, because I think at the end of the day, we are all looking for that encounter of love and relationship, and something that is really available to all of us, and giving ourselves the opportunity to step into that, where we are, and not feeling like we have to do it in such a pragmatic, religious order kind of fashion, but just right where you are, wrestling with things, considering things, but ultimately encountering the everlasting peace and love that God is, that God brings, and that Christ came to reveal to us all through his earthly ministry, death, burial, and resurrection, the same faith that we all hold today. And so I think I can leave it off that.
Yeah, I agree. So again, as we wrap up, I just want to say to you, whoever you are, wherever you are, if you're questioning who Jesus is, guess what? We're fine with that. Jesus is fine with that too. The reality of it is that if you haven't really inquired of who he is, if you haven't taken that step to know, don't just ask anybody either. Go to somebody who's willing to sit down with you and answer your questions. In fact, you can email us, you can message us here. Both of us would be happy to take the opportunity and have the time to sit with you and talk to you about, the encounter that this lady's having, because we don't need to know her. We just know that we've had the same encounter. And so we can speak to that. Hers might be different in some scenarios, but for the most part, we know exactly what she was saying without saying the tears and all. We understand exactly what she was saying. And so, as Sean had alluded to, we're not talking to you about whether or not you go through a crying spell and stuff like that. And we're not talking about that. We are talking about introducing you to the person of Christ, who sometimes that impact just happens on you. It just happens. We aren't in control of it. It's just one of those things that happens. And, we want to encourage you, whoever you might be. You don't have to have a religious activity either. What we're trying to say to you is there is a God, a maker and the creator of the universe. And I'll say this and I'm done. That answers the things that we need to have answered in life. That's origin, right? Meaning, morality, and destiny. These 4 things are answered through Christ that we believe from the Christian worldview, no one else answers. And when you understand this, your life will take a drastic turn and you will understand why you're here, right? Right? Origin, where did I come from? Right? Meaning, why am I here? Right? Morality, why am I supposed to live a certain kind of way? Right? And destiny, what happens in the end? God answers all 4 of those things. And I think that they're very, very important. And we're here for that. So we're praying for you if you're seeing this and you're inquiring about that. And lastly, I would tell you, a lot of people will say, I don't know where to begin. I don't want to begin with you guys, but I'll come back to you guys if I need you. Well, where should you begin? Well, a lot of people will just tell you, just run and go read the Gospels. Okay, I think it's really good for you to read Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. But I also want to share this with you. I think it's important for you to go talk to somebody who can make time for you to explain what your questions might be, your objections might be, and sit with them and tell them that you have objections. Tell them that you have questions. Tell them that there are things that you are curious about and you want to know about them. But you just can't go to just anybody. You need to go somewhere where you look at it and you say, hey, I feel like this person has enough education, background, insight, and wisdom to be able to answer my questions. They have the grace to sit with me while I'm not where they are. They can answer the questions that I have for them. And I want to make sure that you go to a place like that. Now, if I was going to tell you to read something, please hear me. This might be contrary to a lot of other people, but I'd say this to everybody. If you get a Bible, the Bible that I want you to get immediately is an amplified Bible. And the reason I say that to you is there are words in there that to get meaning, it keeps stretching the meaning out. So it starts to make sense to you. So you want to take that and remember, it's called an amplified Bible. And the only book that I even want you to read first, before maybe even you go and talk to somebody, just read this book first, is the book of Genesis. We call it the book of beginnings. Here's the reason why I say that. If you can understand the book of Genesis, if you can read that, you will have all the questions you pretty much need moving forward in life, and everything else will start to make sense to you. And you can bring that to somebody, including us, and we're happy to walk you through that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also in the links in the description below, I'll have what's called Faith Factory. We have actually created something that allows you to just have a lot of different places and tools that you can use if you're beginning somewhere and you're continuing on somewhere, to have people that you can follow. You can flood your social medias with playlists, sermons, specific people in the faith that are really, really profound in communicating the gospel, the message, and just helping you understand it and apply it into your life better and better, filled with tools, Bible versions, all those kinds of things that are beneficial to you as you begin your walk, or you're perhaps continuing your walk. And it's definitely something beneficial. So I'll drop that in the link description down below if you guys click that and have access to. And listen, we appreciate you guys so much for tuning into this episode. We hope that you got something out of this more than perhaps you may know, for future references. And if you like this kind of content, you want to see more, like this video, share with a friend, subscribe if you're new, turn on the post bell notification so you know the next time that we're posting a podcast on here. Roughly twice a week is where we're at currently, filled with other pieces of content swarming around, dedicated to bringing Christ to culture and engaging in reaction clips, much like what you saw in this video, and adding some productive, wise thoughts to it that we hope you can take with you from this day moving forward. We appreciate you guys so much. And until our next conversation, be easy and be breezy. Peace.
Peace.